Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Gen Z. Gen Z.
I have grown so tired of seeing young Christians so excited about Jesus, only to fall away a few years later. So I decided to go on a deep dive on what you need to know to stop this from happening to you, and most importantly, why you must not let Satan deceive you with the same lie that he's used on millions of young Christians over the years. Okay, I can hear exactly what some of you are thinking. What right do you have to talk to me about being a Gen Z Christian, Joe? You're clearly not in my generation, and you've got no idea what it is like to grow up in my culture. Well guys, believe me, I do hear you. But here's the thing, the human heart, it doesn't change, does it? And you'd be shocked if you knew what I was planning when I was in my 20s. You see, I got married very young. I was just 22. And I went straight into ministry, and almost immediately I started seeing things in the church that most young people would never have to face. So here I was going through a really difficult season. I'd moved away from my hometown to a new area. I had no friends. Well, the only friend I had was my mentor, who was more than 30 years older than me. But here's the worst part. I'd open up Facebook and I'd see my old school friends, my non-Christian friends, and they were having the time of their life. They were going to wild parties, they were traveling the world, they were all meeting together in Australia, they were having so much fun. And so, this is what Satan started to whisper in my ear. You're missing out on your youth. You should be having fun like all your other friends from school. You shouldn't be worrying about church politics. You shouldn't be worrying about bills and marriage. You're so young. And soon, your youth will be entirely over and you'll never get it back again. So, although I'm not proud of this, I started to do something. I started to look over my shoulder. I started to think that the grass does look greener on the other side. And I honestly wondered if I actually wanted the things of the world more than I wanted the Lord Jesus Christ. Guys, before you judge me, you've got to know this. I did feel totally ashamed of these thoughts, and so I finally confessed them to this older brother in the faith, my mentor. And instead of giving me advice or a pep talk, he just said one thing: Joe, you need to learn Psalm 73. So I did. And I can tell you it became a lifeline to me. So much so that I believe every Christian, especially young believers, everyone should know this psalm by heart. Why? Well, because it teaches you lessons that you will need when you get these very dark thoughts. So, are you ready? Let's get into it. Now, we don't actually know who this psalm is about. We know a man called Asaph wrote the psalm, but there are two schools of thought. Either Asaph himself wrote it looking at his own struggles, or he wrote it for someone else, i.e. David. Personally, I think it was Asaph who wrote this psalm talking about himself, and you'll probably get a feel for that as we go through this. So here we find Asaph. And he's got a sort of assault on his faith. He's got a grievance that's in his heart. He's got a thought that he just cannot get out of his mind, and he's struggling with it. It's there. And it's a thought that I do believe every single one of us at some point has struggled with in our Christian life. It's a thought or a question that I would be very surprised if you have never wrestled with before. And it's this: how can an infinitely powerful God be good, be righteous, be holy, and yet let the righteous go unrewarded, go through trials, go through difficulties? But on the flip side, he lets the wicked who hate him, he lets them prosper, he lets them be in abundance, he lets them have earthly success. So, let's answer the question: is being a Christian a waste of time? Take a look at this. Psalm 73 verse 2 says, "But as for me, my feet had almost stumbled, my steps had nearly slipped." So here Asaph paints us a picture. Here he is, and he's standing on the very edge of a slippery mountain slope. This is what he can see. It's like it's raining. It's like there's no steadiness there. And he looks over the cliff edge. He looks down, and there he sees right at the bottom is a sheer drop. What is this deep valley called? It is called the Valley of Unbelief. And Asaph is saying, I'm just one step away from slipping down and falling into unbelief. But over to you now. What do you think the issue was that Asaph was struggling with? Well, look at verse 3. He says, "For I was envious of the boastful when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." Here he sees the foolish man, the foolish people, the wicked people, the people who have no care for God. And later he's going to tell us a little bit more about these kinds of people. These are the kind of people who laugh at God, who talk about the Most High in disrespectful ways. And yet these very people, even though they disrespected God, they were thriving. They were doing well. It seemed like they were better off. So Asaph built a logical conclusion in his mind. If you ignore God, if you ignore his commands, you are going to be successful in this life. And so when he saw all of this, and he looked at the exciting life that they were living, Asaph was very jealous. Alright, jump over to verse 5 with me. They are not in trouble as other men, nor are they plagued like other men. Do you see that? Here are these wicked people. Here are these unbelievers who mocked God. And yet it seemed like they didn't have the same troubles that other men had. They didn't have the same trouble as the unbeliever. No, quite the opposite. They were in abundance. In verse 7 it goes on to say, they have more than their heart could wish. I mean, could you imagine that? If every desire in your heart, evil or good, if all the desires in your heart were achievable, were within your grasp, what would that look like? And yet we can probably think of people right now, maybe famous people, maybe even people we know at our school, at our college, or at our job. And it seems like when we look at them, they have more than their heart could wish. They have everything that they could ever want, and yet they have no care, no thought for the Most High God. May I be transparent with you again? As I said, when I was younger, in my 20s, I had a sort of quarter-life crisis where I really did struggle. And again, I want you to know it's not easy to talk about this across the entire internet. But I did feel that I wanted to walk away at points. I really did take my hand off the plough, doing all the wrong things, thinking I wanted to be in the world, drinking in all the passing delights of this sparkling life, even though I was saved at the time and I did love Jesus. So that was in my 20s. But I want to know, am I the only one who's had these feelings before? Just be honest with me if I am. I do really want to know. Because in a moment's time we're going to hear the solution of how to beat these kinds of thoughts. Because there is a very powerful answer in Psalm 73 that I doubt you have ever heard any preacher mention before. But first, I want to share one more secret with you. As you can probably tell, I am a very weak Christian in a lot of areas. And one area that I knew could potentially ruin me is money. So back in 2015, when I started this YouTube channel, I made a decision not to run adverts on my channel because I knew, for me personally, I knew that I couldn't keep my feet on the ground if I had that kind of money running through my fingers every week. So why have I told you that? Well, I believe as I'm speaking this very message, I believe God has brought something into your very mind. You are thinking of something right now that you need to turn from, something that you need to put guardrails in your life. And I would urge you, if God has laid something to do on your heart right now, don't delay whilst your heart is still tender. Don't delay whilst you can still hear the voice of God. Oh, and by the way, on a more practical note, if you are challenged by this video and you're not against ad-free content, please do subscribe for more. Okay, here's a question for you. Did Asaph get any relief from his thoughts? No, look at verse 14 with me. For all day long I have been plagued and chastened every morning. In other words, he wakes up in the morning and he's got these troubles in his mind. In the evening he has these troubles in his mind. He goes to bed, he wakes up the next day and he's got these troubles in his mind. All day he's surrounded by these troubles. All day long he's saying, my life is just full of trouble. But on the flip side, when he looks out and he sees the ungodly, it appears that they are on the winning side. And when he looks at his own troubles in his own life, it appears that he is on the losing side. Now, between you and me, I believe the greatest tragedy is in verse 13. I really find this very heartbreaking. Verse 13 says, surely I have cleansed my heart in vain and washed my hands in innocence. In other words, Asaph is saying, here I am as a man who trusts in God, and I've sought to keep my hands clean from sin. I've sought to stop letting unclean things come into my mind and my heart. I've tried everything to cleanse myself. I've tried to be a holy vessel for you, Lord God. And yet, what was the point? What is the point in having a clean heart? What is the point in purity? There's no gain in being pure. There's no advantage in trying to be a pure vessel for God. There's no reward in it. In fact, it seems like when I look at the ungodly, it seems like the complete opposite. It seems like I'm struggling even though I'm trying to keep myself pure, and yet the unrighteous, they're prospering when they don't care about purity. They dive headfirst into sin. They do everything they want and more. I do wonder, did anyone else pick up on this? It almost feels like he's asking this question, is it even worth continuing in the ways of God? But now, can I ask you this? Have you ever felt like that before? Why am I doing this? There's no end to my trouble. I've tried to be pure. I've tried to guard what I watch. I've tried to be a godly person. And yet, Lord, why are there so many problems in my life? But my unbelieving neighbours, my friends, they don't care about you. And yet they are at ease. Alright, so here's the answer we've all been waiting for. How do we escape this mindset? How did Asaph get out of this valley that he was in? And how did he manage to deal with all of this trouble in his mind? Look at verses 16 and 17, because the answer is very simple. When I thought about how to understand this, it was too painful for me until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final end. So what is the answer? How did he overcome all of this? He simply went into the house of God. He went into the sanctuary of the Lord, and it was there that he got clarity. He got peace. The Earl of Oxford once said, the greatest gift a man could ever receive is to receive something called cubicle thinking. Now, when I told my wife Emma about this, she said, what on earth is cubicle thinking? Cubicle thinking is this: just like a cube has many different sides to it, so there are many different sides to a truth. And here we find Asaph, and he's only been looking at one side of the cube. He's only been looking at one side of the truth, and that's the unrighteous are doing well. They're prospering, even though they're doing evil. But the godly man, the godly woman is struggling and going through all kinds of difficulties. But when Asaph goes into the sanctuary of God, what happens? Suddenly, he sees all the sides of the cube. He realizes the truth. Now, this next part's a little bit important, so you might just want to catch this. But one of the greatest truths in the Bible is this: your life, my life, will one day end. All of us are going to die one day, and we're all going to be judged by a holy God. That is a vital truth that many of us forget, and it's what Asaph has forgotten. Did you know that this psalm actually has a sister, and it's called Psalm 37? And in Psalm 37, the writer says, I have seen a wicked and ruthless man spreading himself out like a green laurel tree. In other words, this evil man, he's prospering, he's successful, he's abundant, he's doing well, he has riches and success, and it's spreading everywhere. But then the psalmist goes on to say, but he passed away, and behold, he was no more. Though I sought for him, he could not be found. In other words, this man, he had his time of fun, but eventually the Lord dealt with him, and he was gone. I used to work in a high school as a classroom assistant with pupils who were aged 11 to 16 years old. And I used to ask these students that I work with, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the most common answer was, I want to be a YouTuber. Or they'd say, I want to be a celebrity. Okay, so at the time that this video is being recorded, I want to ask you, what do you think? Which kind of people do you think young people aspire to be like? Maybe I Show Speed is someone the young men like, or is it Clavicular? I can't say his name and some of you are cringing as I say that. HS TikToky or Caden Cottier, who's in this country. But not that long ago, Andrew Tate would probably be a name that was mentioned, because in 2022 and 2023, he was the most Googled man on earth. He had money, he had cars, he had muscles, the women, and he had influence. So much influence that schools in the UK had to run special assemblies warning their students not to idolise him. And many young men, they would look at that lifestyle and they would think, I'd love to live like that. And to the girls who are listening, maybe they look at the actress who played Barbie, Margot Robbie, or maybe they look at Addison Rae or Taylor Swift, because these ladies, they've got beauty, they've got fame, they've got money, they've got success. You see, all of us, we're all drawn to the surface of these lifestyles. We look at the beginning, but we rarely ask, how does this life, how will it end? So, I'm going to give you two examples, and I will not be surprised if you've never heard of these two celebrities, especially if you are in Gen Z, because they were certainly around before your time. But as you can imagine, I needed examples of celebrities that we can watch. How did they end? The first one is Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson was an amazing actor, full of charisma, charming, rich, famous. He won an Oscar for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And not only that, he makes claims that he had 2,000 lovers, 2,000 women. That was his claim. Now, many men would look at Jack Nicholson's life and think, I would give anything to have his life. I'd love to have all of that money, all of the girls, all of that fame. Those things would make me so happy. But here's the big question. How did Jack Nicholson end? In an interview in 2014, at age 77, Jack Nicholson said, I regret floundering around when I was younger, because now no woman will trust me, and I'm terrified of dying in the house on my own. So in other words, this very lifestyle that people envied of him had actually been the life that he'd regretted living. Okay, number 2, Elizabeth Taylor. Now, I'll be very surprised if the teenagers and 20-year-olds have heard of her name before. Let me know in the comments if you have. In the 1950s, she was rich, she was famous, she was beautiful, and she had all of Hollywood doting over her. Why? Because all the men thought she was just so beautiful. Elizabeth Taylor, when we look at her life, she had a great beginning. But still, the question needs to be asked. How did she end? Well, when her looks began to fade, like happens to all of us, when she began to gain weight and get wrinkles, suddenly Hollywood gave her career over to the younger models, to the younger crop if you like, to Jane Fonda, to Julie Christie, because casting directors and the viewers just became bored of her. But here's the saddest part. Do you know what Elizabeth Taylor was most famous for? Do you know how many marriages she had? Did she have 1? No. 2? 3? 4? No. After 8 marriages, did Elizabeth Taylor ever find true love? No, she spent most of her life on medicated things, just trying to keep herself going. Because if she was honest with herself, in her very epicenter, there was an unspeakable sadness and emptiness. Eventually, she died completely alone, with no husband, at 79 years old, totally broken. But does the media portray that? No. Do we ever see these kinds of things on the highlight reels on Instagram? No. Does the world show us what a life rebelling against God? Does it show us how it will really end? No. And it certainly doesn't show us that death and destruction come to all those who reject the living God. My dear friends, never forget this warning from the Bible. The way of the sinner is hard. It's not an easy life to live a lifestyle of sin. It might look enticing on the surface, but in the end, it's far harder to be a rebellious sinner against a holy God than to live a life of obedience to the same God. So I beg you, please never forget this. The death of the ungodly is a terrible thing. Imagine all of that unrest, all of that misery, all of that regret. And what comfort do these people have when they come to the end of their life? What hope do they have in the future? The only comfort they have is a handful of memories. Memories of the past they can barely remember. That's all they have to comfort them. But now, contrast that with the life of the believer. On the surface, it looks narrow, it looks boring. The men and women of the world, they laugh at us. They say, you really believe this storybook? You go to church every single Sunday. You give up your holidays to do missions and things like that. What a boring way to live. But the question needs to be asked, how do we end? Oscar Wilde. Have you heard that name before? Well, he was a very famous writer. And let's just say he was a very evil man. Very sinful, very prideful. He mocked Christians and encouraged others to mock the Bible with him. And yet there's something that many people don't realise about Oscar Wilde. On his deathbed, he asked for a minister to come and convert him. Balaam from the Bible. You know Balaam, that godless prophet. Do you know what he said? He said, let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his. In other words, he could see that the man or the woman of God, he sees that they die peacefully, but the unbeliever, they do not. And as every man's life draws to a close, I think we all have to ask this very question. Who truly prospers? Is it the wicked or is it the godly? Well, I think the famous evangelist John Wesley has our answer. Speaking about Christians that he's watched time and time again step into eternity, he once said, our people die well. So young Christian or older Christian, never forget this. You are on the winning side. And I also want to say this for anyone who's been sitting here thinking throughout this whole message, but Joe, it is a real joy to be a Christian. Well, you're absolutely right. There is nothing greater in the world than knowing that the living God who made me, who made the universe, he speaks to me through his words. There is no greater joy than praying when you have nowhere else to go, nowhere to run, and yet God hears you when you cry out to him. There is no greater joy than knowing that my sins, all of them, past, present, and future, have been nailed to that cross. I have no guilt anymore, no shame, because Jesus took my shame on the cross. And there is no greater joy than having fellowship fellowship with other Christians, than having a peace, having a mission, having this beautiful task of sharing the gospel with others. It is a great life being a Christian. But if you're not a Christian, what would I say to you? I would say this: you might look good now, but how will you end? Have you ever thought, I'll become a Christian when I'm older? Once I've had some fun, once I've done all that I want to do, once I've lived my life, then I'll become a Christian. Friends, for many people, at the very end of their life, their faculties have gone. You might be lying on a hospital bed alive, but you're not with it anymore. And not only that, right now, as a young person, your heart is so tender to God. You will never have a more tender heart to God than you have right now in your youth. Why? Because as you go on in life, sin hardens your heart. And the Bible warns us that we should not be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin, because your conscience, it does get duller with age, sadly. So my dear friend, come to him right now whilst you can hear his voice calling to you. Before the time of spiritual hearing loss sets in, come to him right now. Come to the one who died on that cross for all of our waywardness, for all of our sin, for all the times we failed God. He died in our place so that we could have our sins washed away. Trust in him. Trust in the one who rose from the dead, because he is the way, he is the truth, he is the life, and he gives every Christian a glorious future. Yes, so okay, right now as a young Christian, your life might be very tough. But I don't want anyone to forget this one key fact: you are on the winning side. And friends, I do believe for many of you, these dark thoughts will come like they came to me. And if that's you, I want you to remember this Bible study of Psalm 73, and I want you to learn it off by heart. Okay, before you go, one more thing. I showed you celebrities who ended very badly, and some of them I imagine you'd never heard of. But what about the world's most famous preacher, who in my opinion, he ended very well? Have you heard of this preacher? Well, go and check out this video right now and tell me on the other side if you do know who he is.